We'll go ahead and get started, and then we will record it for those who are late joining us or those who can't make it. Welcome everyone to our Fisher Paykel training. This is John Westergaard, and he will be hosting the webinar this afternoon. Welcome, John. It's all yours.
Hi, welcome. As Sarah said, my name is Jonathan Westergaard, and I am the technical trainer for Fisher Paykel Appliances North America. For those of you who are not familiar with Fisher Paykel Appliances, we are a New Zealand-based appliance manufacturer that's been producing very innovative products since 1934. Fisher Paykel first entered the North American market in 1996 with a very unique washing machine. But today we will be discussing the dish drawer. So dish drawers were first introduced in North America in 1998 and have been Fisher Paykel's most popular product since then. The dish drawer is produced in both standard and tall heights with a 24-inch width, so it'll fit a variety of kitchen enclosures, and they are produced in both single drawer and integrated configurations. But today we will be discussing the most common issues that arise in the field, and believe it or not, most service calls for these units in warranty is related to installation. So as a technician, you may be wondering, how is this information relevant to me or the service industry in general? Well, a root cause analysis of our warranty data has shown that over 80% of dish drawer failures can be attributed to improper installation. So if these products are not installed correctly, this could lead to improper diagnosis, loss of revenue, ordering and returning unnecessary parts, multiple trips to the site, technician frustration, customer escalation. I mean, the list goes on and on. So there's a variety of symptoms to look for when you suspect improper installation, including drawers that tip or lean out of the enclosure when they're opened, drawers that do not line up with one another, poor wash performance, poor drying, poor draining, flood faults, just to name a few. So the first topic that we want to cover when it comes to the installation and things to watch for when you're called out on a service call for these products is the routing of the drain hoses. This is a very critical part of the installation, and it is almost never done correctly. The hoses are meant to be routed through the service holes that are drilled into the floor of the undersink area, not into the sidewall. So having the lines routed through the cabinet floor ensures the maximum efficiency of the product and also reduces the chances of the drain hoses kinking, leading to other issues down the road. So all of the excess drain hose should be pulled through to the undersink area and trimmed to length as needed based on the drainage setup of the home. You'll often find most of the excess drain hose bundled up behind or underneath the machine. So as we said, all of the excess hose should be pulled through to the undersink area and immediately routed as high as the undersink area allows, or at least 29.5 inches from the floor. So if you're in a market that uses an air gap or a similar type of drainage device, then you will not need a drain loop because the air gap or similar device will take the place of that. But if you are not in a market that uses an air gap or devices like that, then you will certainly need to have the drain loop bracket mounted properly and utilized. They do come provided with the product, but oftentimes you'll find that they're mounted too low, they're incorrectly placed, or sometimes they're not even used at all. So all these factors can lead to some of the issues mentioned earlier: poor washing, poor drying, poor draining, even flood faults. So there's a few different styles of drain connections that we encounter in the field. The most common that we see basically fall into three categories. If you are in an area that does use air gaps or other devices like that, we do recommend a dual air gap where it has two inlets and one outlet. Obviously, each drawer has its own drain line, so we can separate the drainage, and that will absolutely stop the chance of backwashing from one drawer to another. But as we can see here, a single air gap works just as well when the drain hoses are routed properly with the provided yoke. The other type of drains that we'll see, much less common nowadays, is the standpipe. And again, we can see that our drain loop bracket is mounted properly. And then the most common is our garbage disposal, the traditional setup. The most critical factor, any one of these installations is sufficient, but the most important factor is to make sure that all of our excess drain hose has been pulled through to the undersink area and is routed nice and high and is trimmed to length, depending on the installation. So we really don't want any sag here after the high loop. So a few real world examples. What you'll often see when you're called out on a Fisher Paykel dish drawer is, like we said, installation that is not done correctly. So a few things to point out. We can see the drain loop bracket is in use, which is good, but it's a bit too low. It should be mounted quite a bit higher. And we also have a lot of excess drain hose here. So this would be a simple service call to correct if the customer was encountering incomplete draining, improper drying, poor wash performance, backwashing from one drawer to another. Then this more than likely is the culprit and is an easy fix for a service technician. We can just relocate the mounting bracket. Depending on the depth of the cabinet, we can check to see and make sure that all the excess hose has been pulled through. And if it is safe to pull it through the sidewall, then you can do so as long as there's no risk of kinking or twisting the lines. Then we can reinstall the mounting bracket to the proper height and trim the length of hoses as needed. Another example of what you may encounter is a traditional single air gap here, but it looks like they do have all the excess pulled into the undersink area, but it's just bundled instead of being trimmed to length. Again, this would be an easy correction, as we could just squeeze the little wire clamps on the yoke, back the hoses out, measure, trim to length, and reseat our connections properly. And our final example of an improper drain. We can see here, obviously, a lot of excess hose. Our high loop bracket has been installed, but it is just not mounted. And then we also have a very dangerous connection here in the base of the cabinetry. This example here was actually exchanged 3 times for not draining. And luckily, this was installed on an island with a false back, so it would make correcting the issue much easier. We could just remove the false panel, pull the lines through, mount our bracket properly, and make this connection under the sink where it should be. So the next topic we want to cover is leveling. Dish drawers are designed to be completely level, front to back and side to side. Improper leveling can be a contributing factor in some of the most common service calls for the dish drawer, including excessive noise, uneven drawer panels, poor wash performance, and the tipping, leaning, or dragging of the drawers. As a technician, you want to check for level after removing the bottom drawer across the chassis and here on the rails themselves. So this is easily accessible when the bottom drawer is removed, and correcting the leveling is as easy as adjusting the 4 leveling feet. If you have a small ratcheting 5mm bit holder or just a traditional 5mm open-ended wrench, it can make correcting the level on a dish drawer much easier. However, you will need to remove the mounting hardware first. And so when it comes to mounting, there are two different methods to fix the dish drawer to the surrounding cabinetry. You can mount through the cabinet face using these supplied mounting brackets, or you can mount through the chassis itself. We'll first cover the cabinet face mounting with these brackets, and here we can see that the mounting brackets are locked into the chassis across these straps, and it is meant to have the tail ends extend and thread through these slots, not enter the chassis. So these brackets here, they still have about 1/4 of an inch to go before they are fully seated and fully locked in place. But if this is the method that the installer has chosen to mount the product, all 4 need to be used. There's 2 on each side, as well as 2 additional mounting areas on the top of the cabinet chassis itself. And we do also recommend using that as well. So drilling pilot holes is something that we do recommend, because if you are mounting to the cabinet face, there's a chance that the cabinet can split or fracture. Again, that's more on the installation side of things, but something to watch for in the field if you're called out on a tipping or leaning product that isn't mounted securely. When it comes to service, there is a much better method to mount the product or to correct it in service situations, and that is mounting through the chassis. So mounting through the chassis is by far the best way to mount the product securely and semi-permanently to the surrounding cabinetry. So as we can see, the chassis of the dish drawer has mounting brackets that are actually cut into the frame. And there's 4 of these brackets on a double unit, 2 on each side. Of course, as you can imagine, if the cabinetry that you're sliding into is hollow, then you may not be able to use this, but most installations can utilize these mounting brackets, and this is by far a much better way to secure the product to the cabinetry. So luckily, on the service side of things, if you are called out and you do determine that you need to secure the product to the cabinetry, this is by far the best way to do it. Again, simply remove the bottom drawer, and that'll provide you access to the inside of the chassis, and you can drive some screws through the chassis in those brackets to the surrounding cabinetry. And we can see that there are some reliefs in the insulation to mark where those mounting brackets are going to be. So some examples of what to watch for in the field when it's concerning mounting. So if you're called out on a brand new dish drawer for an F1 or a flood error, the most common cause that we have seen is mounting brackets that have not been installed properly. The tail ends of these brackets we can see have gone into the chassis. And what this does is it actually interferes with the raising and lowering of the lid yoke. And if that takes place, the lid will no longer seal against the tub, and you will have some definite leaking and the inherent F1 error code. So this can all be corrected very simply by either uninstalling these brackets and mounting them properly to where the tail ends are threading through the straps, or you can disengage these brackets entirely and mount through the chassis and frame, as we had seen earlier. So the next thing we will discuss is a little feature of our integrated dish drawers. So integrated dish drawers fit seamlessly into any kitchen. And because of this featureless design, the interface is actually part of the inner tub flange. So where the customer is going to select their cycles, their wash modifiers, and things like that, and actually start the machine is all done from the inner tub flange. So with that in mind, there's no way to stop or interrupt the cycle without a button on the front. In the past, Fisher & Paykel has used a variety of methods to interrupt the cycle, but currently we are using a knock to pause sensor. So this knock to pause sensor is meant to be mounted to the back side of the decorative door panel. So this little accelerometer comes connected to the wash controller from the factory, but it does need to be rigidly mounted to that decorative door panel while using the included panel bracket as a guide. We can see that the three mounting bosses of the sensor correspond to the three holes drilled within the panel bracket. Oftentimes, these sensors are left dangling on the front of the tub, are only held on with one screw or the supplied tape, or are not oriented properly. So any of those things will render the sensor ineffective because it needs to sense the vibration coming through that panel. So if you're attending a service call because of the knock feature not working, you should first check the mounting and orientation of this sensor to the decorative panel. Oftentimes, securing it with a couple of screws will fix the issue. So with a drawer-style dishwasher, you can imagine the complexity of venting all of the moisture-laden air to the atmosphere after the cycle is complete. So the Fisher & Paykel DishDrawer vents in a very unique way. On double drawer models, the upper tub vents in the gap between the upper and lower drawers, and the lower drawer vents into the toe kick area. Integrated models utilize similar venting, with the exception of the single integrated model. That unit has a remote vent system. So on single integrated models, this additional tube and box should be attached to the rear of the chassis, and the box itself should be located in an adjacent cabinet, whether that's below the dish drawer or to the side. But regardless of the model, all dish drawers should have moisture protection tape applied to the inner cabinet surfaces before sliding the product into place. It's also required that integrated custom panels be moisture proofed. There's a variety of ways to achieve this, but that is ultimately up to the installer and the cabinet maker. I wanted to make mention of this because if you are attending a service call due to moisture buildup or damage, please take a look at the installation, especially these features, as more than likely something was missed. So we'll now discuss a few service procedures that you may find helpful while in the field. A number of times throughout this presentation, I had mentioned accessing behind or beneath the drawers. And the following video is going to show how to disengage the tub from the rails to access those areas within the chassis. So as we can see, it's a matter of pushing the two tabs on the sides of the tub and sliding the rails back. At that point, the tub can then be lifted off of the rails and you can access the inside of the chassis, whether you need access to the components or you're going to correct some installation issues. The next three videos we're going to watch are regarding the electronics and some of their diagnostic functions. So the first video that we're going to watch here will be how to activate the diagnostic menu and how to retrieve error codes. So let's take a look. As you can see, press and hold the outer two buttons. This will enter you into the first diagnostic menu. DP is the display mode. We can use our cycle selector, or our tub selector, for the upper and lower drawers, and pressing the start pause will illuminate all of the LEDs on the display, and one more time will illuminate the upper drawer's F24 error code. As we can see, another push of that start pause button goes to the previous fault, which there is none. And if we want to clear the fault, we can use the arrow keys or the cycle selector to move the current fault to the previous fault position. And pressing the arrow keys once more will force the previous fault out of the control. So that covers how to access the display mode or the diagnostic menu and how to retrieve fault codes. The next video we watch is going to be our hardware output. So after we've activated diagnostic, we can use the cycle selector until HO is displayed. Pressing the start pause will enter you into HO or hardware output. And we can use the cycle selector keys to navigate through the variety of components that you can test. The dash next to the component indicates that the component is idle. Pressing the start pause button will energize the component, and the dash will turn into a little O, indicating that the component is on or energized. We can use our tub selector to cycle between the upper and lower drawer. And as you can see, here's a table of all of the different components that we can test in hardware output. If we want to return to the menu, holding the power button will get us back to our diagnostic menu. The final video that we will watch is concerning the fast test cycle. So again, pressing and holding the outer two keys, using the cycle selector until FC is shown on the display. The start pause button will enter you into the fast cycle mode. Pressing it once more starts the test cycle. This test cycle is something that, in my opinion, should be used after every repair on a Fisher Paykel dish drawer. It's much shorter than a rinse cycle, and it actually tests all of the major key components. And it's generally safe to assume if the drawer will pass that fast test cycle, it'll operate throughout a normal, heavy, or any of the other cycles that our dish drawers operate on. The other menu or the other options that you may have seen on screen within our diagnostic menu, there's three that we did not cover: the continuous cycle, the high heat cycle, and the showroom mode. Continuous cycle and high heat, those are both for factory testing purposes and not really for field use. And the showroom mode is actually exited when the product is unplugged. So you shouldn't have to ever manually take the product out of showroom mode, as in some other products. So to cover or to more accurately diagnose these products in the field, we need a clearer understanding of the electronic systems. So the first electronic component in our dish drawer is the display module. This module does not contain any logic, and it does not activate any components. It is responsible for acting as an interface between the machine and the customer, allowing them to select their wash cycles, the wash modifiers, and any other options such as delay start. So the display module is located within the upper door panel. There's only one display module per unit, even on a double, and there are no test points for this module, other than checking for your incoming power supply from the wash controller. So this component can be tested in the diagnostic mode, as we've seen in the previous video. So the only way to test this is for power and to check if the LEDs are operating properly. But again, there's no logic within it, and it does not activate any components. The next two electronic components are a little more complex: the wash controller and the motor controller. So you'll find one wash controller per tub mounted to the front of the tub behind the door panel. So this wash controller contains all of the logic and decision making for the machine. You can think about this as the brains of the operation. So it directly powers the optics, the temperature sensor, the display module, the dispenser, the drying fan, and the water softener if your model is equipped with one. So it's powered by 24 volts DC from the motor controller, and all of the components listed above can be checked with your meter from the harness connections at the wash controller or through the hardware output test mode that we saw in the diagnostic menu. The last electronic component we will discuss today is the motor controller. There's one motor controller per unit, and it can be found on the back wall of the chassis behind the bottom drawer. The motor controller is basically a relay board. It does not contain any logic and can be thought of as the muscle of the machine. It's meant to carry out the actions requested by the wash controller. So the motor controller directly powers the higher voltage components, such as the water valve, the lid motors, the heater plate, the stator motors, and the wash controller itself. It's powered directly from the supply voltage, the 120 AC from the terminal block. And again, all of the components listed above can be tested with your meter at the motor controller harness connections or through the hardware output test mode within the diagnostic menu. So a video showing the full installation process is available on our Vimeo channel, and the installation manual is available from our customer website at fisherpaykel.com. For those of you who are already authorized Fisher & Paykel service providers, you can always contact our technical support through the Contact Us form on the CBW site, or by calling us directly at 1-866-936-7327. Please keep in mind, if you are not an authorized service provider and you do try to call technical support, priority does go to those who do have an account already with us. So for those of you who are not authorized servicers for Fisher & Paykel, if you are, please contact our service administrator, Mike Logan, and he is available at mike.logan@fisherandpaykel.com. I just wanted to thank you all very much for your time and attention, and I hope that some of the information today we covered was helpful. And like I said, I know this was dish drawer basics, but hopefully we covered something today that you found useful.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. If anyone has any last minute questions, you can type them up in the chat, or you can reach out directly to Jonathan or to Fisher & Paykel. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to more Fisher & Paykel trainings in the future.
Certainly. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Okay. I don't see any other questions, Jonathan, so we're good. Bruce did a good job of answering them.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
Yep.
Thank
Have
you,
a great day. Yep. Bye.
You too.